All right, let's get started. As I said, my name is Tom Fazzini. I am the Communications Director with the Alliance for the Great Lakes. We're so glad that all of you could join us today for this conversation about plastics and business. The Alliance for the Great and the role that businesses can play in reducing plastic pollution. The Alliance for the Great Lakes has, for more than 50 years, been a nonpartisan nonprofit working across the region to protect our most precious natural resource, which is the fresh, clean, and natural waters of the Great Lakes. We have staff headquartered in Chicago with additional staff across the region and in Washington, D.C. Again, thank you for joining us. We are in the midst of Plastic Free July. For those who don't celebrate or aren't aware of it, it is a global movement that encourages all of us to examine our reliance on plastics. And there's a good reason. Every year, the Rochester Institute of Technology estimates that 22 million pounds of plastic enter the Great Lakes. Our Adopt a Beach data from volunteers over the last 20 years collecting Great Lakes litter shows that 86% of that litter consists of plastic. That plastic never really goes away. It just breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces called microplastics. Researchers have found very high amounts of the tiny plastic pieces in all 5 Great Lakes, which provide drinking water for 40 million people. They found microplastics in, for example, Great Lakes fish, drinking water, bottled water, and beer. So we hear a lot about personal responsibility to reduce single-use plastics, and that is important. But substantially reducing plastic pollution is also going to require action from businesses, governments, and manufacturers. And that's what we're here to talk about today, that business and manufacturing piece. One of the policies, for example, that the Alliance promotes is implementing extended producer responsibility policies. What that means is holding producers of plastics responsible across the entire life cycle of their products, from the packaging to the design and materials to the end-of-life management. We're joined today by several experts who we are very happy to have with us. I will give a brief introduction to each of them, then I will turn it over to them, and then we will get to your questions. You'll notice that there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can use that at any time while you're listening to the presentation. When questions arise, I will be asking those of the panelists in the second half of the presentation. Oh, it looks like one of our panelists might be sharing their screen. Okay. Well, that's fine. No problem. It is working. All right. Quickly, we are joined by Dr. Ren Montgomery. She is an internationally recognized expert on sustainability and corporate greenwashing. She's going to talk about why businesses choose to adopt sustainability practices and this issue of greenwashing. We are also joined by Tim Frick. He is the president and founder of Mightybytes, a certified B Corp. Tim will talk about the B Corp movement, which integrates sustainability into core business practices. We're also joined by Sarah Damron, Senior Regional Manager with the Surfrider Foundation, a national nonprofit dedicated to the protection and enjoyment of our oceans, Great Lakes, and other waters. One of the things among many that Surfrider does is work with restaurants across the Great Lakes to reduce their plastic use, not only because it's the right thing to do, because it makes good business sense. And then finally, we're joined by Andrea Densham. She is the Director of Regional Government Affairs with the Alliance for the Great Lakes. She's going to talk about the progress in the region and some of the policies we're working toward. Again, a reminder about that button to ask questions. At any time, you can submit those, and I'll be going through those over the course of the presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ren Montgomery. Take it away.
Hi, Tom. Thank you so much. And hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. You wouldn't know I'd taught on Zoom hundreds, if not thousands of times, but spazzing out over here. They keep moving all the buttons. I swear, it's driving me crazy. So I'm just going to share my screen, hopefully the proper one this time. And I'm going to start at a really, high level kind of drawing from the business literature here, hopefully give you a couple of ideas of how we think about this really broadly, and then allow Tim and Sarah to sort of drill down to the business level. So hopefully that will all fit together well. So let me try this again. Hopefully I get to the right one. Now when I want to share it, I swear I've done this a zillion times, but it's acting up on me. Here we go. Okay, my browser is presenting okay, sorry about this. I don't know what's happening. All right. I seem to not be able to share now, even though I could share when I didn't want to.
Well,
So
I
anyway,
don't. Well, we could move on to one of the other panelists, and Ren, if you want to separately email
sure.
me the presentation, I can present it, and we can get back to your presentation after
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. If not, I'll wing it. So we'll let Tim go first and we will try to figure out what's going on here. Thank you.
Excellent. Tim, take it away.
All right. Hopefully, I don't have the same sharing issues. We'll see. Oh, it says someone else is sharing. I'm going to send a request.
Yep, that
All
should
right.
work.
There we go. Hopefully, I can share this and you all can see this as full screen.
Looks great.
Yeah, so thank you for the intro, Tom. As you mentioned, Mightybytes is a certified B Corp. As of this month, we've actually been part of the certified B Corp community for 15 years. If you're not familiar with what certified B Corps are, we adhere to high levels of accountability and transparency to measure and improve upon our social and environmental performance. You may sound like I've said that a couple times before. Um, because I have. And last year, the B Corp community, there's about 11,000 of us around the world. And last year, we were given a whole new set of standards, which you have on the screen here, for certification. So Mightybytes, my company, which is a digital-based agency based in Chicago, is going to go through our 6.3 certification at the beginning of 2027. And so we need to look at all 7 of these areas that you see on the screen. And so, in other words, every B Corp needs to improve its purpose and stakeholder governance. In other words, making sure that you're keeping stakeholders aware of the decisions that you make in your business that are going to affect them, provide a fair working environment, provide support justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. In addition to it being Plastic Free July, it's also Disability Pride Month. So, for example, all B Corps have to have an accessible website, for instance. That's an example of like some of the things that B Corps do that in order to maintain our certification, this is what we support. Supporting human rights as well as taking measurable action around climate. And relevant to this conversation here are the last two, which is environmental stewardship and government and affairs and a collective action. So the environmental stewardship and circularity section of the B Impact Assessment, which is the B Impact, which is the tool that we use to certify, has a variety of standards underneath it, one of which is circular design. And so I'm just briefly going to touch on that. As I mentioned earlier, Mightybytes is a digital agency, so we don't have a lot of plastic in our supply chain. However, we do, we look at our supply chain as a series of different tech companies and partners that we build with in the same way that like Chicago local cleaning products company Meliora might look at their supply chain so that they can get plastic out of their packaging and stuff like that. Or similarly, preserved products, which creates their products out of reused plastic as well as compostable plant-based materials and stuff. So all B Corps in depending on size and industry and everything like that, we all do a different set of things in order to support the B Corp standards. And then circular design is one of them that is probably the most relevant to this. And then the second, which I don't have a slide on, is the government affairs and collective action. So, for instance, Mightybytes does a lot of work in climate action and working to reduce the environmental impact of tech. And so, we're looking at like how do we not only improve our own environmental impact around that, but then also what can we do to make sure that we're supporting responsible legislation, of which we're going to talk about extended producer responsibility a little bit later. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now because those are the only two things that I have. But just generally, circular design is built in for digital companies as well as for physical product companies, and so need to look at how they reuse materials in their supply chain and in their production workflows and that kind of thing. And then all B Corps essentially get audited by B Lab, the governing body that certifies us to make sure that we're adhering to all 7 of those things that I just had on screen. So I'll leave it there, and maybe Ren, you're able to share your screen now.
Yep, we should be
Tom,
able to go, Ren. Let me
okay.
just get this started.
Great. My apologies again. I have never had that issue, but anyway, there's first
worries.
time for everything. So yeah, let me know when we've got it up. Great. So again, just starting at a really high level, happy to talk to anybody out there more about greenwashing. I hit a couple of slides, Tom. I guess you're not getting that, so put that forward, please. Okay, great. Let's start here. Sorry about that. Okay, so first of all, we think often about sort of, I like to think of a carrot and stick approach. I don't like the terminology, of course, thinking of the poor donkeys, but one of the really big carrots that has been out there, I think, for organizations, and the good news is that there's a lot of pressure around sustainability and it's working. So consumers are asking for sustainable products. This is just one example from the consumer product goods space, which I think is really relevant. So just showing that even though, green goods in the space, which a lot of plastics would fall into this, of course, are, only around 20% or so products, it'll be a lot higher in other product categories, have achieved remarkable growth over the last number of years. So 31% share of that growth. So we can see why a lot of companies want to be in this space and claim that, make certain claims around sustainability, green, plastics, etc. So the good news, and if you can just flip forward, Tom, thank you. And we just go through these. So the good news is we see lots of plastic, lots of products that are green, Keurig cups, the Apple Watch, claims on sustainable meat by JBS, the largest manufacturer, approach to net zero. This Be Planet campaign here is a Lululemon campaign. So again, a plastics or microplastics related item. The unfortunate part, though, is our carrot has been so successful that not all of these claims are backed up by evidence or by real work. So what all of these claims have in common are ones that have been called out for greenwashing, either by NGOs, activist groups, or active lawsuits or complaints to competition bureaus. So this is certainly something in this space we want to be careful of. We've got that carrot, we're getting companies into this space, but are they actually doing it for real, walking the talk? So if you could jump forward, Tom, thank you. Drawing from my own work, sorry, but probably the most used definition of greenwashing out there in the academic literature and picked up a lot by practitioners and in the legal space and regulatory space as well. Communication that misleads people into forming overly positive beliefs about an organization's environmental practices or products. So this is what we want to avoid when we're thinking about plastics. And if you could just keep going, that would be great. So you may think, okay, Ren, I know you study this, but there isn't actually that much of it, is there? Well, it's about 50% of claims are probably greenwashing, according to our definition. This is some really recent data out of the EU that's been doing a really nice job on both regulating and measuring greenwashing. So 53% of green claims give this vague, misleading, or unfounded information. So it's not a small problem. But the other thing I hear a lot is surely most companies don't do this intentionally. And I agree, there's many that are just, those are the companies I try to help who are just sort of stumbled into this, weren't really planning it. So, but if you could just jump forward again, Tom, that'd be great. This is another survey which is quite fascinating to me. 58% of executives globally say their company greenwashes. I'm in Canada, you're in the US. Our North American numbers are sadly even higher. About 72% of executives are aware that their company is doing this. So this is where our stick comes in, right? We might need a little bit of that stick. Maybe our carrot is working just a little too well. And if you could move again. This is the good news is the stick we're seeing a lot of. There's been a real explosion around, as many of you probably know, disclosure, reporting, transparency regulations around the world. And along with those have come really increased, and this is just over the last couple of years, regulations and legislation around greenwashing. So this is just an example, and I give Tom the link to this report, which you can drop in later if anybody's interested. But laws around greenwashing popping up around the world. So that's one of our sticks, as well as that activist pressure I mentioned before. And if you could just go forward, there might be Great. And so I will leave the link to this as well. I've got it up on my website where I try to make academic research on this really publicly available. I'll show in just a second. But here are a bunch of different types of greenwashing. We put these out so that both, if you're on the activist or policy side, you can, or as a consumer or investor, you can keep your eye open for greenwashing, try to avoid it, try to, ask the important questions if you see some of these claims that are vague, that don't offer proof, that are sort of jargon, or maybe selective disclosure when they're really good on one product. The Apple Watch was accused of this, where they're really strong on the Apple Watch, but all sorts of other parts of the company that were much weaker. And you can, imagine which those are. Or the political spin, they could be doing well on one thing, but lobbying against climate action or against limiting microplastics or plastic pollution. So different types of greenwashing. And one more slide there, which I won't dig into, but just to show some more examples of types of greenwashing. Again, we'll leave the link if you're curious about this, but sometimes we're even seeing certifications, unfortunately, which used to be our antidote to greenwashing, that are now being a little bit greenwashed or created. And I will wrap this up just with leaving you with the Greenwash Action Lab website, and I'm happy to talk to. My contact details are there. So thank you so much, Tom.
Thanks very much, Ren, and I'll share those links in the chat presently. Next, we will go to Sarah.
All right. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Excellent. Great. Well, thank you so much for having me here today. Really pleased to talk with everybody about Great Lakes Friendly Restaurants, which is a program of the Surfrider Foundation. So just for a little background and context about how we got here. So we are a national nonprofit, but we're also a community of water people working to protect what we love, which includes our Great Lakes. And these are our core mission areas, with one of those very important areas being plastic pollution prevention. So Surfrider's foray into this work really started with beach cleanups. This is a crew from our Milwaukee chapter out there doing the good work. And if you're here with us today, you've probably been to a cleanup of some sort, or maybe you do your own cleanups. So you probably understand that cleanups are fun. They definitely do the job of getting garbage out of our environment. For us, we also use them to collect data. However, they aren't really the solution to our problem, unfortunately. And over decades of leading these cleanups, we've noticed two really important things. One is that we could do cleanups forever and ever, unfortunately. Every day we could go back and there would be more there to clean up the next day. So we really need these upstream solutions to prevent pollution at the source. And then two, most of what we're collecting at our cleanups are some sort of single-use plastic convenience items. So that could be cigarette butts, plastic bags, polystyrene foam, bottles, caps, and things like foodware. So although we view policy solutions really as the best comprehensive solution to addressing these source issues, we do also feel and have seen that there's a need for bridge programs to connect the dots. And that's really where Great Lakes Friendly Restaurants has come into the picture. So Great Lakes Friendly Restaurants and then the sister program Ocean Friendly Restaurants comprehensively covers our whole nation. But the idea is that we have businesses in this food service space participating and committing to implementing specific practices that are going to reduce the amount of plastic waste generated and therefore the amount of plastic litter that's making out into our environment. So we invite restaurants to be a part of the solution, and we want to recognize them for the work that they are doing to reduce their plastic use, particularly front of house, again, so that anything that's going out the door is not ending up something that we're finding at our beach cleanups. And then the bigger picture, participating in this program helps really create a culture and shows that there is a future that we can have and that we can work towards together that is not filled with plastic. So we do have criteria for the program. This slide shows our mandatory program criteria and optional program criteria. I want to note, kind of touching back to what Ren was talking about, Our program is not a certification program because we don't have the bandwidth to send people around to every single restaurant and certifying them and ensuring that they're doing every single thing. Our program is a recognition program. So we work with restaurants to, they're letting us know about the practices that we're doing. We will send volunteers to just check up and make sure that they're doing the things that they're doing. But, we don't have people visiting these restaurants on a monthly or weekly basis, making sure that they're doing all the things. So it is kind of a partnership as well. But anyway, back to the criteria. So the mandatory program criteria, every participating restaurant has to implement. These particular criteria are really focused on reducing single-use plastics. And then the optional program criteria, it really covers some of the other areas of sustainability as well. There are a lot of criteria here. There are various programs out there in the world that do work with restaurants on sustainability issues. And we're aware that we have a fair amount of criteria and that they are very strong, but that is by design because we really do want there to be meaningful outcomes, not greenwashing that results out of restaurant participation in the program. At the same time, we also want the criteria to be achievable, so they're not overly stringent. So finding that balance is really important. So what might motivate a restaurant to participate in a program like this? So really three things and some combination, some more than others, depending on the restaurant. But some restaurants come to this space already having a sustainability ethos. Taking care of our environment is important to them. It's part of what they do. It's embedded in their business. Another reason would be cause-based marketing. So affiliating their brand with sustainability and appealing to a specific customer base. And then another reason is their bottom line. Restaurants are businesses. So at the end of the day, they have to be able to make money, keep the doors open, keep customers coming back. So all these reasons are legitimate reasons. And we want to make sure to recognize that for restaurants. And in paying attention to these motivations, it helps us understand how we can better work with restaurants to achieve our mutual goals. So with those motivations in mind, that has helped us design the benefits that we offer to restaurants in participating in the program. So some of those benefits are more economically driven. So the first three here on this list. And some of those benefits are more marketing based. Again, wanting to make sure that we give restaurants an opportunity to talk to their customers about the work that they're doing to reduce plastics use. And their customers are paying attention and able to recognize them doing too. And so one resource that we have is a ocean-friendly foodware guide. And this is, again, back to what Rin was talking about, to help restaurants navigate this really challenging space of, okay, what is a sustainable alternative? So we have done some of the homework for restaurants to help identify products, reusable products, of course. That's first and foremost what we want to help encourage restaurants to use. But then some other better alternatives if they can't use reusables, and then things to stay away from. And then we also have a quick guide for restaurants just to help them navigate the criteria, better understand what they mean and how to meet those. And then not on this slide, but very importantly, we provide just personal support to restaurants, talking with them about what their goals are, what challenges they might have, and helping them through some of the decision-making process. So one such example is with JT's Genuine Sandwich Shop in Chicago. So for all our Chicagoland friends, please go visit JT's. They're doing great things out there. So one of our program leaders had reached out to JT's asking if they'd be interested in participating in the program. And, the chef/owner was very excited, really eager to participate. But they let us know right out the gate that all of their in-house, their dine-in foodware was single use. But that did not deter them, and that did not deter us either. So we were able to work together to figure out exactly, what those sticking point items were, what some reusable alternatives could be, and it could, be cost effective for them, so that they could achieve their goals and participate in the program. And so by, working with them through this process, we were able to help them save a ton of money. So basically what we did is calculated the amount that they would be spending on the disposables over the course of a year based on the average number of customers and use that comes through their doors in a year. And then also calculating the amount they're spending to replace those disposables with reusables. And the net is $25,000, more than that, 25,500. So really exciting that they're able to do good things, but also save money and make it work for their business. We do have other case studies that folks can check out on our website, surfrider.org. So some of these folks are in other parts of the country, but still telling really interesting stories about their particular business and business model and how they were able to make some switches to reusables while also saving money. The most exciting part is the impact of this program. So through participation by Great Lakes friendly and ocean friendly restaurants, we have 653 participating restaurants across 32 states, and that is saving 41 million meals from having all this disposable single-use plastic junk being put out there. So we're really proud of that, and we want to continue to grow this program because the more that we're able to grow it, obviously it's reducing actual plastic waste, but it's also building this culture and community around going plastic free, which is super important to building the political will to enact policy and other such things. So lastly, I just want to encourage folks to support those restaurants out there doing the good work, do your part as well. And if you want to get involved in any way to help us identify restaurants that we should be talking to or to help talk to restaurants yourselves, please let us know. And please find a Great Lakes friendly restaurant near you. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Sarah. I shared in the chat a link to the Surfrider page that has more information about that, as well as a form where you can sign up to volunteer to help identify restaurants and help with outreach to restaurants on the program. A reminder that you can submit any questions that you have using the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. We're starting to see some of those questions come in. We will get to the questions immediately after. Andrea speaks a little bit about some of the policies and the landscape of these kinds of laws around plastics in the Great Lakes region.
Thanks so much, Tom. And it is such an honor to be on this call with our partners, many of whom all of which we work with, but are really, really great examples of how we effectuate change in the public policy space, right? We have to have strong, smart researchers doing really thoughtful analysis and research to be able to inform the great public policy work that we do. We need partnerships with businesses who can help us better understand how these types of things are impacted by businesses and what types of innovations might be on the cutting edge, with the P Corps and Tim's team has been core of. Also just want to make note that, Ren has really helped the Alliance and so as Tim have this kind of a vision of how the type of work that we need to do moving forward and providing us really insightful strategic advisement as we do our work, and our partnership with nonprofit leaders like Surfrider. Surfrider has been a true leader in identifying both challenges and solutions, and that's the kind of work we want to do. Each one of these groups, whether it's businesses, researchers and academics, or nonprofits, are trying to have an all of the above approach to addressing what is a really substantial and complicated challenge. But we believe that when we will all work together, we're going to be able to find, and we are finding, some really smart solutions. So on the procurement side, which is purchasing, which both Tim and Sarah talked about, one public policy tool in our toolbox we've used is having municipal, state, and federal government make procurement or purchasing decisions that moves them towards more sustainable options, using tools like Ren discussed and Sarah discussed to ensure that those purchasing decisions aren't driven by marketing, but rather by evidence and science. So procurement is one tool in our toolbox. We used it in Illinois to help the state of Illinois make decisions to move in that direction. And the former federal administration also was using that as a tool in their toolbox to try to address federal purchasing, which, as you can imagine, is pretty substantial. When that happens, it drives markets. The other driver of markets is consumers. So each of you as part of small nonprofits or organizations, your purchasing decisions also can really move markets and really have an influence on what's available to us. The other issue that's really important is source reduction. And Sarah's team at Surfrider help restaurants every day reduce the amount of plastic that they're purchasing, and then the amount of pollution and the amount of single-use plastic litter or waste materials that's coming out of it. So moving towards things like reuse, and then getting rid of the worst, things like foam foodware made out of styrene, which is a known toxic, carcinogen and known toxin. And so we want to move away from those worst of the worst. In states like Illinois, we're trying to pass bills to get rid of and transition away from foam foodware and move towards more sustainable options like Sarah's team has been teaching restaurants how to do. But when we get up at the more systemic level, to make sure that we're having a really lasting impact on these issues and addressing some of the issues both Tim and Ren and Sarah talked about, extended producer responsibility is one of the tools in our toolbox. It's a tool that has been emerging as a really important systemic one. Our friends in the EU and Canada have taken a leadership role in advancing this type of solution, as have some of our friends on the West Coast. California in the United States was one of the first in the country to have a packaging extended producer responsibility law. It's being implemented as we speak. But very recently, and importantly to our region in the Great Lakes, Minnesota passed a bill a couple of years ago, an extended producer responsibility bill that holds producers responsible for what they purchase. It creates something called a PRO, which puts the producers, the brands, and our state leaders all at the same table, determining what the costs are if there's too much single-use plastic production of waste made, and really providing benefits and incentives to moving away from those things and moving towards solutions like reuse. It is only with those two carrots and sticks together in a systemic way, in a longitudinal way, and in an ongoing way, where we're both measuring and we have really good and consistent and longitudinal measurement of what kind of production is being made, as well as what kind of waste is happening, as well as making sure that we have much more efficient and equitable distribution of resources to help in local municipalities where our waste and our recycling and our composting are managed, to make sure that there are resources for each one of those small municipalities or large municipalities, and it's more equitably distributed across cities and towns. What we're in the midst of doing right now in the state of Illinois, and we're hoping to expand to our region, across our region, with following the leadership of Minnesota, is developing a needs assessment, which means we're doing that really hard work of trying to collect really good data, collecting data about what's being produced, how it's being recycled, how much is ending up in waste, and even how much compost we're able to do in a state like Illinois. Minnesota's in the midst of running their own needs assessment process. And then next up, we're going to be working all together to be able to write legislation, we hope, that will hold producers' responsibility, reduce the amount of single-use plastic waste, and come up with more sustainable solutions for managing from production to end of life, to ensure that we're keeping that plastic out of the Great Lakes, out of the sources out of the sources of drinking water, like the Great Lakes, right? 40 million folks receive their drinking water from the Great Lakes. So we want to make sure that we're advancing public policy solutions that are really smart. And so I'm going to stop here, but I just wanted to give you a really wide swath of the kind of work that we're doing, from source reduction to really expansive and substantial solutions like extended producer responsibility. But it takes everyone who's on this call today, from businesses to academics and researchers to other nonprofit leaders, to work together. And each of you on this call is part of this solution, and we need your help in trying to advance really smart and thoughtful solutions. So with that, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks very much, Andrea. We, as I said, are getting some great questions in the Q&A chat box. You can enter your questions in that function, and we will get to them during this Q&A section, which is about to start. So let's start with something, Andrea, that you just ended on, about how all of us need to come to the table on this piece. I'm wondering, what can people do to encourage businesses to reduce plastic?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different levels, right? So one is working with and joining with the kind of work that Sarah and Surfrider are doing. Our friends in Illinois at Shed have been doing some work on this as well. Everyone who does this kind of work, we can all work together on it. So that means that if I'm going to a restaurant and I'm going to get to go liquid, I'm going to get a coffee to go, bringing my own reusable item, and then even having a conversation with the staff there and saying how important it is to me that they give me the opportunity to use my reusable item is really important. So talking about why you want to move away from single-use plastics. And then the second part is so using more reusable items, moving away from single-use plastics, talking about it, but then also making really smart decisions on purchasing. Tim talked about a company here in Illinois that has a bulk non-plastic contained laundry and home cleaning materials. They're extremely high quality, really great products, and they have thought themselves as businesses really thoughtfully to make sure they're not making products made out of plastics. Supporting a business like that can go a really long way. The other thing is obviously talking to elected officials, and we're in the middle of election season. Across the Great Lakes region, people are running for office, letting them know that this is an issue and they want, and you as voters want to see them making really thoughtful decisions. And at some point, Tom, I can come back and talk about deposit return systems, which I failed to talk about at the top.
Sure. Piggybacking off that question, we'll get back to the deposit returns because I did see a question about that someone had submitted. For Tim and Ren, similarly, you're in rooms with CEOs, CFOs, with folks in business, and how do you make the case to them to incorporate sustainability and plastic reduction into their systems?
You want to go first, Ren? Oh, I think you're still muted, Ren. I'll go. So usually for me, when I'm talking to folks, it's about helping them. I mean, Sarah had such a great example of like the fact that long term, one restaurant can save 25,000+ a year just by switching over. It's helping organizations. We work with both for-profit and nonprofit, and so helping with all the organizations that we work with understand that by focusing on sustainability and thinking long term around a lot of the things regarding your supply chain and your production workflows and all of that kind of stuff, that ultimately there is almost always a really great savings there, a really good, a good ROI for, you know what I mean? Like that really there is an ROI in sustainability. It just may not come next Wednesday. You know what I mean? Like you have to really think about the long-term game here. And I mentioned up at the front when I was talking about, there's circularity and the government affairs sections of our standards. B Corps are required to do that. And so like we're already thinking long term in those. And so, partnering with companies like ours and those that are working on these things is, not only just from a consumer perspective, like buy our products or go eat at our restaurants or use our cleaning supplies or whatever, but then also thinking about we're also looking at value a little bit differently. It's not just about making money. It's about making sure that we create shared value across our value chain. And so we're looking at our partners and we're looking at all of those things. And so oftentimes there's opportunities, much like the work that Mightybytes does with the Alliance and stuff like that, to create value that is not just an exchange of monetary value, but it's actually looking at things like where everybody wins and rising tide lifts all boats and all that stuff. Go ahead, Ren.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Tim. And I might just drill down on one particular piece that I think a lot of businesses miss on that value creation. And this is one that you can almost get the payback on by next Wednesday. But I'm employees. And I think people are often thinking, okay, what do consumers want to buy? But in an environment, when really good, high quality employees are hard to come by, we're seeing again and again in studies that they're looking for businesses that align with their values. And so they're looking for sustainable businesses, businesses that care about justice, obviously about the environment. And so they're drawn to those companies. Don't do this, but they'll actually work for you for less money if it comes to the, if there's that alignment. So I didn't say that out loud, but the research shows that really robustly. but given to sort of equal companies. So, but the other flip side of that is these are the same employees who are really aware if you're not walking the talk. So if you're greenwashing or if you're just sort of hand waving about these things, it will really increase turnover intentions. And we see this is especially true with these sort of high sort of cognitive ability type jobs. So whether you're looking for people in analysis, rational thinking, anything like that, any of the jobs that AI is not going to replace for you, those people are really sensitive to these things. So I think that's one thing that employers really miss a lot of the time, and that really changes a lot of minds too if you're out there having these conversations. So
based on what Ren just said, I'll add one thing to that if you don't mind. And that is that, like, because some of these things, like you think about the points on two of Ren's slides, there's a lot of things on that list. And that has caused a lot of companies to kind of back away from these things. And B-Lab put out a resource. B-Lab is the organization that certifies B Corps, put out a resource with Creatives for Climate called the Green Shouting Guide. And it's really about like how to be open and transparent over time in your communications around this stuff so that you're appealing to the people that Ren just mentioned, and that you're doing so in an ongoing basis, and you're not just going out there going, pew, 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 this is our coolest thing that we just did, and then shying away the rest of the time,
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just say the most up, but your employees are going to be the ones who notice the most if you're not consistent, right? Because they're there, they hear every message, but all of your stakeholders are noticing, and we're certainly trying to focus on that in our book. But also, I study green hushing too. Don't do it; it doesn't work. It also violates trust, just like greenwashing does. So, shout loudly.
Excellent. Well, we've had some questions about the specific example of restaurants reducing plastic use, and Sarah, the work that Surfrider is doing. I'm going to combine two questions that we got into one question because they get at this central issue of affordability and the bottom line and plastic reduction. So the first question is, some of our small restaurants say they cannot afford not to use plastic, that better methods are out of their small budgets. And what is your reaction, Sarah, to that when you're talking to businesses? And then similarly, is there any data on the restaurant dishwashing cost when switching to reusables? Patricia was thinking of smaller establishments that may not have a big enough dishwasher or space for one. What ideas are there to help address those situations? And those are kind of two specific examples.
Yeah, thanks so much. And sorry to stay off camera here, but I want to make sure that my connection stays stable. So I hope that's okay. But anyway, so to the question about affordability, I mean, that's a real issue, right? Especially for small businesses. And especially, as we were coming out of COVID times, I mean, restaurants were closing their doors right and left. And so we were very sensitive to that reality and not trying to push restaurants to go further than they could, because staying open is their number one job. So it's really, about working with the restaurants and trying to figure out, maybe some of the items that they are looking to switch to could potentially be more expensive, particularly like if they're not switching to a reusable, for example, and they're looking to switch maybe a styrofoam takeoutware to some kind of bagasse type of takeoutware, that is going to be more expensive in a unit cost. But there might be more cost savings in some other switch that they're able to make. So for example, with in-house dining, if they're able to get rid of the little plastic ramekins and switch over to metal, then they're sending a lot less of those out the door. So on balance, they might be able to achieve their goals of not spending a lot of extra money, potentially even saving money while keeping their business going. And then on the dishwashing front, that's a really great question, because that's certainly a consideration. If you have reusables, you're going to need to wash them. So a lot of restaurants, even if they aren't using reusables in front of house, they need a dishwasher to deal with back of house. They're cooking, they're using pans, they're using blenders, they're using things that they need a dishwasher for. So a lot of times they will have a dishwasher around. It's just a matter of figuring out how do they deal with the additional volume of bringing back products, reusable items from front of house. There are some businesses that don't necessarily have a dishwasher already, so that is definitely a significant cost, because dishwashers are thousands and thousands of dollars. So it might not be possible for them to make that switch right away. They might need to figure out a longer term kind of financial strategy if this is really a goal that they have to go reusable. And we support that too. We do actually have, for example, in Northern Ohio, that chapter was able to get a grant as a pass-through grant, so that if there are any restaurants that want to join the program but have really big financial hurdles like that, that they need support with, the chapter is able to give out some mini grants to help them achieve those goals and be part of the program.
Thanks, Sarah. Next, I want to get back to that question that I promised I would get back to about deposit returns, Andrea. So this is from an attendee. Does it make sense for plastic containers to be subject to deposit returns, as is the case for aluminum and glass containers in some states? If collected, is there a market for recycled plastic containers?
So in the Great Lakes, Michigan has been has a long-standing deposit return system. It's a 10-cent system that's been around for a long time. There's quite a bit of discussion right now, and we're encouraging and trying to help support this to reform and update the system. It was built decades ago and needs to be reformed and updated. And there is interest in it. There's been polling from our colleagues at the Michigan Environmental Council that folks are really eager. They really like the program. They like the deposit return program. It's really important to them in their identity as Michiganders. A former Michigander by birth myself, and who lives in Illinois. Also very proud. And it needs reform. And so plastic bottles that are in that system, it works well. And in fact, it helps having deposit return systems because the producer of it knows there is a sense of some circularity involved in it. It doesn't have the same number of times of reuse as does metal or glass, but there are systems for it. And the more we can contain, if there is plastic created, the more we can contain that within well-designed and thoughtfully designed systems that contain it and then reuse it as much as possible. That is way better than it being used once and thrown away. So deposit return systems are really important. There is some extended producer responsibility bills and systems, not only here in the United States, but in other places. For example, our colleagues in Canada, who we work really closely with and work in partnership with, who have both EPR and deposit return systems. Sometimes it's just a matter of staging these kind of systems or thinking about how to grow them thoughtfully. But for those of you who are interested in more of it, not only looking to Michigan, but looking to our colleagues in Quebec and in Ontario for two longstanding systems that are in our Great Lakes region, but there are also lots of other solutions in the EU and across the United States.
Excellent. I want to get back to Tim and Ren with another question kind of a bit about businesses and sustainability. What do you think, or where do you encounter as the biggest myth for businesses about incorporating sustainability and reducing plastics?
That it costs too much. I mean, we hear that all the time. Whenever we start talking about it, it's like, well, what's the ROI? And it's there, and but it does require that conversation to be had. So I think that's the thing that like we hear over and over and over. I'd love to hear if you have a different idea, Ren.
No, I think I certainly hear that one as well. Just given, I don't know how your air quality is in Chicago, but ours is horrible in the Toronto region because of the wildfires. I think just the idea that we have time, that, this is something that we're going to plan for the future. And it's not, as we can all see out our windows, this is immediate. So I hope that's changing, but as our politicians here in Canada at least are demonstrating, they're still using that one.
Yeah,
just to that
really
point, and if you don't mind, Tom, and that's 100% right. We hear that all the time. Also, when we're trying to work on public policy issues, there's two things I just want to note. And Ren, you were getting to this. Plastic is made out of petrochemicals, so chemicals and petroleum products. And when we're thinking about and I'm in Chicago, and I know all my friends in the UP and in Minnesota and Wisconsin are having terrible air quality today too, right? The impact of climate is real. and we're experiencing in more acute and more severe ways with each passing day. And we can do things to reduce the impacts. And some of that is moving away from the use of chemicals and petroleum products and using more reusable products so that we're actually not only reducing the amount of pollution that's happening at the end of life and litter, but also from the beginning. And I often say, and I didn't say this at the top, but the Great Lakes region is really, really unique because we are the producers of refining of oil, the creation of chemicals, many of the chemicals that are used in plastic, and we actually then make the plastic products themselves. And there's tons of concentrated pollution that comes from that, often that impact frontline and fence line communities that are impoverished, or and often communities that are concentrated in Black and brown communities. So we have to just really acknowledge that disparity is there, that this is also an environmental justice issue. And then if we do the right thing, and this gets to Ren's point, and I think Tim's point, that B Corps have been in a leadership role. If we help people make more sustainable choices, we're actually helping on a really big, a massive, which seems like unbelievably challenging issue, which is climate, and we can do it bit by bit. And the last thing I just want to say, and Sarah, maybe you can say something, and Tom, I'm sorry to point in this direction, but one thing that we hear so much is that there aren't very many sustainable options. And as we've been working on foam foodware in Illinois, we went to the place where restaurants go to purchase products, and the amount of sustainable issues. And this is where we need to use Ren's lens to make sure these are truly sustainable. But the more sustainable options there are, is growing and growing and growing to the point where like foam foodware is this small little subgroup because people don't want it. Restaurateurs don't want it, consumers don't want it. And so it's the market is really changing thanks to all of you.
Great.
This is about policy and gets maybe to Sarah's expertise and Andrea's. This is from Catalina in Cleveland Heights. She's talking about, since Ohio municipalities are largely preempted from banning certain single-use plastics used in commerce, including in restaurants, one thing that they are advocating for is a citywide only upon request ordinance. So saying to restaurants that they will provide foodware accessories only if the consumer requests them. She's wondering about support to advance these kinds of initiatives. Andrea, I know that this is something that we encounter across the Great Lakes. And I also want to expand it a little bit to these preemption laws. There was another question about understandably focusing on restaurants today, given Surfrider's work, but expanding the lens a bit to things like single-use plastic bags at grocery stores and some of the challenges we have with that.
Yep, we do have preemption. And Sarah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, I don't want to opine too much, legally speaking, on the exact interpretation of these preemption statutes at the state level, because a number of them have not really been tested by the courts yet. So they are a little open for interpretation. But I do understand what you're talking about in Ohio. I happen to live in Ohio myself, so I'm very familiar with the preemption statute in Ohio. And I'd say, let's talk. So I'm part of the Plastic Free Cleveland group. We have a plastic free dining working group. And we actually, at our most recent meeting, we're just talking about some of the green teams and sustainable teams in Ohio that are interested in moving forward some kind of skip the stuff type practices or ordinances. So I'd love to be in touch and see what we can move forward specifically in Northern Ohio.
And I think skip the stuff is a really smart way forward. And, and the thing that I was going to point back to Sarah, so maybe Sarah, you could talk a little bit about how it works at the restaurant level and how Surfrider has been helping people culturally understand how to do it. But it's amazing what the difference is between just giving people a bunch of stuff that they never asked for versus getting it upon request only. And from what I've understood in talking to restaurants, but also other businesses beyond restaurants who just give you extra things that because they think and they perceive that you want them. And that includes bags. That when you move to a place of just asking if someone wants a bag, for example, in a number of municipalities across a number of our states, the municipalities themselves are doing as much as they can to try to address plastic bags issues. And if you're asked, do you have a bag? Do you want us to use one of our bags? Do you have it? What kind of bag do you want to use? it really engages the consumer, meets them where they are, and usually increases trust and engagement with that business. So it's a benefit all the way around, and definitely skip the stuff. We have model legislation with many of our partners across the country. That is an option in some states. And Sarah, do you want to just talk a little bit at what it's like with the restaurants themselves?
Yeah, sure. So one of our mandatory criteria for Great Lakes Friendly restaurants is actually offering all those condiments and junk upon request only. And really notably, want to note the cost savings opportunity there, because when you're not just sending all that stuff home with people who don't really want it in the first place, you're spending money, and it's money that you may not need to be spending in the first place. In fact, same with the straws upon request part of our program. Restaurants are finding that when they're actually asking their customers or leaving it to their customers for them to ask their staff themselves, those items are not going out the door. The people aren't in need of all that junk to fill their drawers at their homes. So yeah, it's a benefit for the environment and also a benefit for the business's bottom line.
Great. Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. We are almost at the end of the hour. I want to just thank again our panelists, Andrea, Tim, Ren, and Sarah, for lending their expertise to this conversation. It was a great kind of high-level perspective of larger business considerations on sustainability and reducing plastics, and then getting into the nitty-gritty of kind of what it means to businesses like restaurants to adopt these practices. I shared in the chat a link. We will follow up via email with a link to a recording of the webinar, but there's a link there if you haven't already to sign up for the latest updates on how you can protect the Great Lakes on our website. And then finally, your support makes this work possible. Consider making a donation on the Alliance for the Great Lakes website. It's greatlakes.org to make sure this work continues well into the future. There's a lot of work to do, a lot of good work happening, and a lot of work to do, as you heard today. Thank you so much for your interest in protecting the lakes. We look forward to you staying in touch and joining us again. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.